Great. Thank you. I'm a techno peasant. I will admit to that. I'm not afraid to say it. So thank you everybody for joining me again. This is take two on the Remembrance event for the Templars. As you all know, well, most of you that I see here attended the last one, and 20 minutes before the presentation, my laptop decided to commit suicide. And well, it was quite interesting. I don't think I've ever put a presentation together that fast, but we did it anyway, and we survived it. And I wanted to offer it again today because for me, there were a lot of things that I needed to say that got left out because I didn't have my slides. Then we had technical issues. There was a lot of the energy was really strange, I think, that evening, and lots of you had issues joining as well, and with sound and things that were nothing to do with my end, but we still had a lot of shifts in energy. I want to say about that, actually, I had a message today from a page fan, and he was talking about how he thought that some of the Templars have reincarnated, and there's a belief there, and that the energy is weird and feels weird, and things are happening because of that, and maybe they're back. I don't know if that's true. I feel they never left, and we're going to talk about that today. They never left for me, in spirit, in terms of their inheritance, the legacy that they left us, that they gifted us. And, a lot of everyday things. But anyway, so I'm going to share my slides and we'll begin, okay? There's going to be videos and a lot of things, so it's not going to be death by PowerPoint. I promise you that. Can everybody see my slides? Can you all see them? Hello? Yes?
Yes, it's good. It's
Great.
good.
Great, thank you. Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm going to, let me just put it on slideshow current. There you go. Okay, you should be seeing that. Okay, so today I am wearing the colour green as a tribute to my beloved Ireland, and also Mary Magdalene, the Druids, and of course the earth goddesses. This is the color that they would have worn, the ancient priests and priestesses, green. And we often see Mary Magdalene, especially in works like by Jan van Eyck, who was very well versed in esoteric studies. Among other things, we see Mary Magdalene wearing a lot of green. So wearing Ireland's colours, I need to say a few words in Irish today because I am very grateful for being here. I'm very grateful to this land of healing that has done so much for me. So bear with me. I will do my best. Apologies, Irish people, if I pronounce things not correctly. But Fáilteamh Creole Haig Elin Lachlas Erin Tina Lehish Slonche Haig na Fe Agus Go Marhe Namra Cujo. It's a very big, hearty welcome to the Emerald Isle for all of you, the land of healing, health to the men, and may the women live forever. That's the note I would like to bring in on today, because we are going to talk about women a lot. And I'm not a feminist. I believe in equality. The men are very much needed, but the women have been left out quite a bit. And yes, there were women Templars, so we'll get on to that later on. But I'm really pleased to see you all join this event today, and I have a few esteemed historians joining me. I have friends from Rosslyn Chapel, our colleagues. I have students of mine, which is a pleasure to welcome here today. And of course, my colleague, Steve Meyler, he's here today. I would like to introduce him first. I would say if he can do a wave, but his camera is not available right now. It's unavailable. Steve, if you can say hello to everybody, that would be great. If you're around.
Hello, yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you fine.
Perfect. Yes, I'm here, alive and well.
Great. Thank you for attending this second torture event by me. So
Not at all.
it's a pleasure to have you. And I was visiting Steve the other day, looking at the work for the upcoming book. So there's going to be 3 books on the Knights Templar. And the first one is called The Way of the Rose, which has a lot to do with Mary Magdalene and women and the divine feminine in terms of the Knights Templar. And I have to say, as always, he pleasantly surprised me. And there were quite a few images, especially that one of Temple Moor, and of course Tintern Abbey and that grey slab, the Templar grey slab. Really magical stuff, you know. It really, they really moved me. So I'm very pleased to be bringing Steve back with me to on another crazy adventure. You know, we'll see where the next one takes us to. I'm also very pleased to have here today and introduce you to Stephen Muir, Dr. Stephen Muir from Canada. He's a professor emeritus of religious studies. He is a very well-known, renowned historian, friend, colleague, mentor from the London College of Studies. He specializes, if I can say, for me, one of his specialties at least is the divine feminine. And that is how I came across his work, attending a lecture of Mary Magdalene a while ago. And he's lectured on Lilith as well. And he's very, very well versed in esoteric things as well. So I'd like to give him the floor for a moment.
Hello, everyone. Lovely to be here. I hope you can hear me, and I'm looking forward to the presentation and lots of support and enthusiastic wishes to you, Helena.
Thank you. Thank you for attending. Thank you. Thank you. And yeah, you know, we have, I just want to say a quick shout to all the people that have come today and some that will be joining later. I do know that there's going to be Knights Templar orders from Mexico, from Latin America. Of course, we have wonderful Andy Gotts here from Belgium, OTAC, civilian Belgian Templar Order, and of course the founder of Dos Templarios Wines, which I'm going to be talking about later, because Andy and I have done a very nice project that I'm very, very excited about. So I want to share that with you all later on. And let's get started. Okay. So I'm going to begin, as we've begun with Irish, with this video that you all watched last time, and I will comment it in detail now. So.
Through
Now, this song, here we have it. We didn't have it last time, so we can see the lyrics for a minute. It's quite important. It's in Irish and English, obviously, but it's called a macaronic song, and I'll explain a little bit what that means. The subject of the song is a young maiden, the lady that we see, and she is talking to her love. She's telling her love to walk with her, a man who's gone away to France to fight a war. And she's asking him in the chorus, which is what is sung in Irish, to walk alongside her as if he was still there. In the verses which are sung in English, with the refrain in Irish, the narrator tells of the things that this maiden would do to keep her beloved safe, basically selling everything she owned in the world to buy him either a sword of steel or a coat of steel, an armor, depending on the version that you listen to. And at the same time, she has doubts that he'll ever come back. It's something I think that every woman must have gone through, and it was quite a difficult thing to go through at the time. He's gone to fight in the wars abroad, and that's really the last she'll probably hear of her love. But still, she has hope that he will be Slán, which means kept whole, so that he will be kept safe entirely. But here, I think in the song, and those who are Irish who are listening to me, it means more uninjured or unscathed. So the song, which you see the lyrics there, I just wanted you guys to have a look at them. It does end on a rather sad and realistic note. At the same time, she's torn between her love for her man that's gone away to war, but she also wishes that she was free from this infatuation, this love that she feels for him. And I've shared this story because I work a lot with archetypal psychology, and you're going to say, well, what has this got to do with the Templars and everything else? But it does have a lot to do with it. We can compare this maiden to Mary Magdalene in a way, who supported Jesus financially and in every way, with her support, with her friendship, with her companionship, with her love, emotionally, financially, and she followed him to the ends of the earth. Indeed, she was at the foot of his grave, and she was at the cross. She was one of the Marys at the cross of the women who was there when he was crucified, or that's what we're told anyway. There's many versions of this. And Mary Magdalene is, of course, the patron of the Knights Templar. And finally, she was elevated to being a saint after centuries of being portrayed as a common prostitute. This began, by the way, with Pope Gregory the Not So Great, as I call him. He did a lot of harm to women and the church. Not the church, sorry, the society, but especially women, and would affect pagan lands with a law as well that was to, because they were aware then of ley lines and the power of the land, there was a law that came out to build on previous pagan grounds to usurp the energy, to usurp the power of these lands. And that is why we find churches today built on land where there were previous churches, where it would be much easier to build on clearer land. And often these churches are built on not just on previous structures, but structures that are built on top of water, which makes it really, really crazy, because there's all sorts of construction issues. They couldn't have picked a less ideal place, but there is a connection with water, life, the goddesses. John the Baptist, say no more. Water is very, very present, and also with the Templars, and it carries energy. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit. But anyway, this girl at the end of the song, she says she's willing to virtually go broke in order to support her beloved and his new career. The explanation has to do with what happened in the 17th century. James Stewart and Queen Mary and all of that. I won't go into it now, but this is a song that is tied to the Jacobites very much. And many believe that the Jacobites were a little bit responsible, shall I say. I mean, there's many versions of how Freemasonry emerged, but there is a Jacobite rite, and there is Jacobean Freemasonry. So this is connected to that, and many historians and people believe that the Jacobites are connected to the Knights Templar, that they carried forth their legacy. So this is why I shared this. I think it's a song that is important in terms of what was happening with women and the times. But let me just get out of the presentation here. We'll go back to other songs afterwards. When I do lectures or presentations, I like to include songs and music, because music is one of the 7 noble liberal arts, which were meant to be studied by the Knights Templar. This is in the Latin rule of the Knights Templar, and it's part of what the Freemasons study today. So I'm not going to compare and do anything like that right now, but it is relevant. Music for me and poetry are the languages of the soul, and the soul is something that was very, very present in the minds of the Knights Templar. So just want to show you a couple of pictures before we go on. One second. My laptop is... So this is in Rosslyn Chapel, which a few people here will recognize. And we see the Agnus Dei in one of the photographs on the left. Okay, the Agnus Dei became a symbol of the Knights Templar. And for me, it's connected to Jesus, but it's very much connected also to the Knights Templar, the fate they suffered, the persecution they suffered. There's a scene that you're all probably familiar with in the Bible where Jesus goes to the temple and denounces the activities there of the priesthood, especially the selling of animals for ritual sacrifice and the profits they were making. And I think for me, and I've discussed this with Dr. Muir, I think this is something that is key. Not maybe as to why the Templars adopted this motif, but it certainly mirrors what happened to them, because he opposed something that he believed was wrong and for financial gain. And we're going to talk about money a lot today as one of the reasons for their downfall. And I think that that was one of the main reasons that we have the Romans, Pontius Pilate, wash his hands of the whole thing. And Jesus, well, you know, he met his fate because he stood up against the system. He stood up against these priests, and he was sacrificed like the Agnus Dei for his beliefs and persecuted for other things too. But the Knights Templar adopted the symbol, which one of the meanings is persecution, is suffering. And I feel that very much they met a very similar fate to Jesus. So I will get into that a little bit more afterwards, but just want to show you a few snaps before I get into the body of the lecture. This is from a preceptory in Ireland. So Ireland is the great unknown when it comes to the Knights Templar. There's a wonderful, wonderful book called The Knights Templar in Scotland by Robert Ferguson, which I highly recommend if you would like to know what happened to the Templars in Northern Europe after 1307. I think it's really well put together, really well researched. And it shows that the Templars were in Scotland from 1128. And it didn't just suddenly arrive, you know, in 1307 when they were arrested and the ones that escaped. But actually they had been there all along since the beginning, since they were granted those lands by King David. So, and in fact, Robert Ferguson mentions this. There was a book found with listings of the Knights Templar properties. They had amassed over 600 properties in Scotland, and some of them continued to be in Templar hands well into the 16th century and even later. So this is, I see you nodding there, Nick. Yeah, I'm watching everything. I'm like, God. This is important because we have the same situation in Ireland, but Ireland never gets any credit, and I'm going to put it on the map where it belongs because it was a very important place for the Knights Templar. So this is one of my babies. This is one of my, I found it by mistake, to be honest. I got lost, but this is in near Tipperary. I won't say any more. And the next slide shows a map here of the Templar preceptories, supposedly in Europe. I got this from a Templar website. I found that the numbers vary. So they mention 9 in Scotland, 11 in Ireland, 45 in England, 360 in France, 59 in Spain, 15 in Portugal, and so on, 9 in Belgium. I don't know if, Andy, you would agree with that. And of course, we have Poland and Czech Republic, Austria, Italy, Greece. It's really funny, but people were telling me, I don't know who it was a while ago, I think I had this conversation with you, Andy, that the Templars have never gone to Greece. And there's a wonderful monastery which I need to go to still. I believe it's called Meteora, and it's on top of a hill next to other monasteries, and it's full of Templar symbolism. I mean, it's beautiful. It's like something out of Indiana Jones, really. I have yet to go. So yes, they were there. It wasn't just the Hospitallers, you know. So what I'm trying to do, this is the Templar preceptory, or the church rather, near the, it's called Templetown, where the Knights Templar were in the Hook Peninsula in County Wexford. The Hook Peninsula was given to the Templars by Henry II, husband of Eleanor of Aquitaine, in 1180, so quite early on. And it's one of the places that, for me, I mean, I lived there, I moved there, and I felt the energy just so bizarre, so strong. I think that's something that happens with all of Ireland. The energy just, especially if you're sensitive, it just sort of hits you, you know. I couldn't ignore it, and I didn't understand why in such a small area of land there were so many Norman and Templar. I mean, there's even a chapel to St. Helena and a well to St. Helena. I was quite overwhelmed in this little peninsula. I have no idea right now how many kilometers it is, but I mean, I lived there. I've flown over it. I used to fly, so I've flown over it with a plane. It's not a very big area of land, so there is something energetically there. And the Knights Templar worked with ley lines. They worked with energy. They marked their buildings with a special symbol. It looks like a star to show which were on a ley line. And in ancient times, it was believed ley lines, what they are, is invisible lines of energy connecting sacred sites. A little bit like if you guys practice yoga, we talk about the chakras being energy points. So think of these sacred sites as being energy points connected by the invisible energy ley lines. Just as in our body, we would have the channels, the meridians, connecting these chakras together. And we have more than 7 chakras, but I won't get into that today. So I have discovered that there are more preceptories than they tell us in books. It's going to be one of my jobs to be mapping them, hopefully, and finding them, and hopefully not killing myself in the process, because I'm still recovering from a broken ankle and a broken knee. I'm better. I'm swimming, I'm doing things, but it's been interesting. So this is another shot. By the way, these photos that you're seeing, wonderful photography by Steve Meyler, my colleague. They were in the book, Loftus Hall. So, and you can visit all of these sites. They're in the Hook Peninsula. And of course, we have the Templar grave here with the Agnus Dei that I was mentioning before. This is one of my favorite places. I come there and I sit there when I need answers, when I need advice. I find that the presence of the Templars is strong, and their wisdom too. It really helps me, and it's a beautiful place to watch the sun go down. So if you guys are into that. And if you want to know where it is, if you don't know it, message me and I'll let you know. And of course, the wonderful lighthouse, Hook Lighthouse, built by William Marshall, Knight Templar, the greatest knight that ever lived. He was a Knights Templar. And William Marshall basically founded New Ross. Now, New Ross, which is nearby, has connections with the Kennedy family. It has connections with the pilgrimage to Santiago as well, because we did have ships going from New Ross and even the surrounding areas to the north of Spain for the important pilgrimage to Santiago. And of course, you know, they would have, and the families that were here, the Norman families, they would have embarked on this very, very important pilgrimage. We even have a bay called the Bay of St. James as well, and this is part of the St. James Way. So the Spanish Camino, you can go to it from here. I haven't done it yet. I need to do it. But anyway, so before I continue on the next topic, which is a very big one for me, I want to talk about the religion of love. I've begun the talk with a video on love, and that's going to be the prevailing theme today, even though we are talking about the end of days of the Templars. Bear with me. I'm going somewhere with this, so I've not lost the plot here. It's very, very relevant. So let's watch this video for a moment, and we'll talk about it afterwards. Right, so let me just, 1 second, people. Right, so this video is important because the Templars practiced tolerance, and this was actually the main reason, well, one of the main reasons, but it would contribute to making up the main charge for their arrest. Okay, the main charge, they were accused, the order was accused in total of 127 charges. Now, I've gone through the documents. Alain Desmogers and Malcolm Barber have done great work on this. And the 127 charges were for the order, the main one being heresy, which was a fashionable charge to throw around at the time. I will go into it in a moment. And then individually, the Templars that were interrogated, because a lot of them were not interrogated, they were just caught, thrown in jail, and left to rot, and others were actually strangled in their beds. And I need to say this. There's a village in Ireland, which I'm not going to mention right now, but it's the name, because I'm going to be doing a little video for all of you guys on, but it really moved me. And when the 1307, Friday 13th or whatever we want to call it, when that tragic day happened and the orders to the rest of the Templars came, or rather were opened at dawn, and Templars throughout France, because they weren't arrested anywhere else. Okay, we're talking about France at the moment. That's where it happened initially. When that happened, I think Philippe Le Beau thought that the process would be rather swift and quick. He didn't expect it to go on for years, as it did. But as it did, because a lot of the rulers of European, let's call them kingdoms, because we didn't have countries then really, they were reluctant to hand over any Templars. They were reluctant to take action. So this took a while. And Scotland was excommunicated. Scotland was a friend of the Templars, so nothing really happened to them there. We only had 2 Templars that were interrogated and set free, released, so allowed to continue their lives. And the Hospitallers that were there fled, because most of the Hospitallers were English men. So with Robert the Bruce back in power, it wasn't a place for them to be. But I will talk about that in a little while. So what happened in Ireland, there's a village. I really don't understand what happened. It's with a preceptory and a church, and they're connected with the tunnel, which I would like to explore. Hopefully I will do that and come back alive. But the village went mad. All of the Templars of that preceptory were murdered. All of them. So this for me is a hard thing to say, because Ireland has always been very tolerant, and we've only had 3, 4 maybe if you want to count, or include discrepancies for numbers, witch burnings here for witchcraft. This has been a very pagan-based, intolerant, accepting country always, with a very unusual Catholicism, Christianity that embrace the pagan saints here and the pagan traditions. So I don't know what possessed, and I'm going to use the word possessed, the citizens of this village to murder Templars. I believe some were murdered as they were sleeping, and the rest were taken out and put on stakes and set alight, on fire, alive. The whole preceptory. I think that is just, I don't know, I lack words. So I will be doing a video on this. But anyway, so this embracing of tolerance, which was a very good thing by the Templars, because I can relate to it. I've traveled all my life. I'm the daughter of a diplomat. I've had to go to different countries and embrace the language, embrace the culture, embrace the traditions. And this is what the Templars did. This was how you kept the peace. And I will not rant on about pilgrims today, one of my least favorite subjects, because no, the Templars were not founded to protect the pilgrims. The Hospitallers had that job before the Templars, okay? So I always say, people, do your research, but this has been parroted until exhaustion by historians, even well-known historians, that the Templars were founded to protect the pilgrims, and it's simply not true. We don't really even have any evidence to confirm this. And this is due to William of Tyre, who is known in history to be inaccurate and biased towards the Templars, never mind anything else. And this was penned down, I think it was 60 or 80 years after it happened, after supposedly the founding date of the Templars, which is given as 1118, 1119 by most historians, but I will disagree completely with this. They were actually founded much, much earlier than this, and this will be in my books. But anyway, the way they did keep the peace was diplomacy. For me, the Knights Templar, and I can see it, having lived that life myself, they reached agreements with the Islamic leaders there at the time, with the assassins specifically. Godfrey of Bouillon was the first one to do this. So this is how they kept the peace. And this is why they were able to embrace a very Muslim principle of tolerance. Historians, in fact, have commented on the tolerance of early Muslim society, especially towards Jews and the Christians. And actually, when Jerusalem fell, if we look at how the Muslims treated the Christians, and the Jews, they still allowed them to continue to worship Jerusalem. But we Christians were much more hostile to anybody that wasn't Christian. And I think that's embarrassing. I think everybody deserves a right to their own faith. And my faith, well, I was baptized a Catholic. Due to my work in history, I have turned away from groups, societies, cults, any organized form of religion I do not want to be associated with. And I don't feel that my heart is with the Catholic Church, but rather, perhaps maybe, if I need to stick a label on me, maybe Gnosticism, which I'll describe in a moment, is more appropriate. And that is what the Templars embraced. The Knights Templar were never Catholic. And if you know where to look, this is in the Latin rule as well. They were never Catholic. They were Christians, but not Catholic. Different things. So there was a tolerance by the Muslim society for the Jews and Christians who were called the people of the book, okay? The Arabs specifically, I work a lot with medieval Arabic manuscripts, and they learned to respect literature. They preserved the libraries, the culture of local communities. We still have some of these works in Spain. Toledo was a place where we had the Jews, Christians, and Muslims living together, very similarly to Troyes in France, which was a Kabbalistic center. And this is wonderful. I think when that was happening, I think the knowledge, the environment, it must have been really, really magical. And as long as the conquered people respected the supremacy of the Muslim faith, it didn't matter whether they followed it or not. They were pretty much left to their own devices. Now, I wonder why we couldn't do the same, Medieval Christian reaction was always ambiguous, always tinged with hostility. And the Templars, this main charge of heresy was based on how they embraced these cultures and respect for the people that they had learned from their Muslim brothers. And this is only the act, I can say, of somebody who is intelligent and appreciates wisdom, appreciates knowledge. It wasn't anything else. But they were condemned for their imagined sins, not real ones, So this is one of the things that I want to mention. Matthew of Paris would also say a lot of things about them. But I want to read, just for a moment, I want to read you a couple of paragraphs of a story that shows this tolerance by the Templars. So one of the most remarkable passages from the Crusades comes from the memoirs of a Muslim man called Usama ibn Munkid. Okay, so Usama he survived basically 93 years of wars and politics. He was a poet, he was a warrior, he was a diplomat, and he was very tolerant of the Sultan's enemies. So this is why he was kind of set aside as well. But there is a story with him because he had great acquaintances with the Franks, and there's a Templar source. I think it's dated 1140, which basically mentions that this man referred to the Templars as his friends. In the story, Usama relates the theory that the Franks, while violent and crude in their own environment, could be civilized by contact with Arab culture. And I don't know if we can talk about that the Templars were civilized, but certainly they appreciated wisdom. They appreciated the things that could teach them. It didn't matter where they came from. And that is why we have those beautiful churches in Europe today. The wisdom that was imported from the East and many, many other things. So we do owe the Templars a lot in this sense. So Usama visits the Al-Aqsa Mosque. This is one of the versions of the story in the headquarters of the Templars. And to allow Usama to conduct his prayers in peace, the Templars evacuate a small unnamed mosque, which they had converted into a chapel next to the Al-Aqsa Mosque. One day when Usama is in the church praying, a Frank, newly arrived to Palestine, attacks him. Usama is praying in the wrong direction. That's what he's told. Since he's facing Mecca for his prayers, he is facing east-northeast. The stranger insists that he face east like a good Christian, presumably towards Eden. The Templars come in and remove the man, apologizing to Usama. The man returns, the Templars eject him again. This happens several times, and finally Usama gives up and leaves. But in all the various versions of the story, Usama is always referring to the Templars as his friends. I think that's a beautiful, beautiful idea anyway. So I want to move on to something else that's very relevant. It has to do with Egypt, okay? Now, you can all see this let's call it painting. This can be found in many books nowadays, but it was on the walls of pyramids. It's a ceremony, it's a rite, the weighing of the heart ceremony. And what we see here, we see the deceased on the bottom. Put it big for you guys, 1 second. Current slide. Right, you see it better like this? So we see a man in white on the bottom, on the left side of the screen, and he's being led by Anubis, the god of the underworld, who holds an ankh. The ankh is known as the breath of life. And actually, it's a symbol. The other name of it is the crux ansata. But the symbol of it is the union of the feminine and the masculine together. The loop of the ankh is the womb. And the vertical part is the part of the male anatomy called in Eastern studies, the lingam. So it's a phallic symbol. So the union of both makes the breath of life. Wonderful thought, I think, but very, very true. And this is seen not only in Egypt, it's seen, we'll see it in a moment in Gnosticism, okay? This is a very important belief. And I feel that it was embraced by the Templars. So Anubis is leading this deceased man in front of the scale. And we see in a scale, we see a little, I'll send you guys this in the, after we do the lecture so you can see it better, okay? But we see two things on the scale. On the left side, we see a little pot or a jar, which is the hieroglyph symbol. I worked with hieroglyphs and I'm a member of the Egypt Exploration Society. And this symbol in particular is called the Ib. The Ib. The Ib looks like a vessel, like a jar. And it was used to represent the heart. But archaeologists who were not trained in spiritual studies were finding it really hard to understand when a person died why they never found hearts in the canopic jars. The heart wasn't removed. Why? It should be removed because they need it in the afterlife. But it was considered so important that they wouldn't remove the heart. And there's a reason for this, okay? But let's stay with the hieroglyphs. There's another hieroglyph for heart. So in Egypt, we have medical treaties, and medicine and magic were combined as one. The heart, Ib hieroglyph that you see there, actually was a symbol for the spiritual heart that contains our soul. It's the vessel that contains our heavenly soul, like Grail, if you will. And the symbol for the physical heart, the fleshy heart that we all have in here, was the hati, the lion's paw. It's the top part of a lion with the paws like that stretched out in front. So now we know that when we see that symbol there, that's not a physical heart. That's the heart, spiritual heart, which in spiritual studies, in wellness, in spirituality, we call the heart chakra. Okay? So that is a Hindu term, if you will, comes from the East, but the Egyptians worked with energy. They worked with chakras. They called them something else. So what we're seeing here is the spiritual heart being weighed against the feather of Mahat, the feather of truth and justice. And then we see a crocodile goddess called Amut or Amit, the devourer of souls, who is waiting to see if the heart weighs more than the feather, then she will devour the heart, the spiritual heart, and she will deny you access to the field of reeds, which leads to the field of stars, to the afterlife. And then on the very right of the screen, we see a god with a bird-shaped mask, which is Thoth or Tahuti, which later the Greeks called Hermes. He's the god of writing, the god of alchemy, and a lot more things. But he will be very, very important, and he comes up a lot with the mysteries and also the Knights Templar. So what we're seeing there is, we understand now that there was a spiritual heart. We understand the chakras. And how you would make your heart lighter was by being a good person, by doing good things in your living life, because what mattered most was the afterlife. This is a key belief which I feel was embraced by the Templars, and we do have evidence in a number of ways, because what the Templars were, they weren't really fighting the Crusades. I mean, they were involved in the Crusades, but if we actually sit down and look at military historians and look at the numbers, there were never more than 300 Knights Templar in the city of Jerusalem at any one time. That's a very small number. It's a very small number. So, yes, they were involved in fighting. Yes, they were involved in Crusades, but not in the ways that we have imagined until now. I think it's always good to do your research and research numbers. So what were the Templars doing, and who were they? Let me just get out of here. I have talked about this before, and they were a group of friends and relatives, essentially, if we look at their origins, who traveled from France and from Flanders to the Holy Land. And Godfrey of Bouillon was, of course, let's just call him the leader if you want to call him anything. But Godfrey the Bouillon meets with them in the Holy Land. He gets elected King of Jerusalem, and he says he's no king. He does not want to be crowned with a crown of gold in the place where Jesus wore a crown of thorns, which I love. So that just moves me. He is the defender of Jerusalem. And Godfrey sets up the first two military orders in Jerusalem, the Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre in 1098, and the Order of Our Lady, the Priory, of Our Lady of Mount Zion in 1099. The first one, the Holy Sepulchre, to protect relics. That was the main purpose. Relics are very important to the Templars and, of course, Christians. And the second one to protect the bloodline, essentially. And for me, the Templars are kind of born from the second one, but the idea of the Templars, and I think the main founding fathers of the Templars and the structure, was already in place prior to the First Crusade. That's what I believe. So, and we're finding evidence, new evidence every day. We only have to look at a letter that was sent to by a bishop to Hugh de Payens, asking him in 1114 not to abandon his wife for the Knights of the Temple. 1114. We go back to wives and loves. So he was married. That's a Templar. That's one. And William Marshall was also married to Isabel de Clare. St. Clair family. But we'll go back to that in a moment. So I just want to show you the chakras for a second, because this is important, and we're going to do a little meditation in a little while. So we have 7 main chakras, which are energy points, okay, in our body. More or less, that's the locations are not exactly correct. The root chakra is a little bit lower down, and the crown chakra is a little bit higher up. The spirit world likes symmetry, so they would be at the same distance of each other in what is called the first layer of the aura, which is the physical subtle body. Okay, we have 7 layers of the aura that match the 7 layers of the chakras, and we have many more chakras. It depends on what tantric school you're following. All of this comes from tantra, and there's many theories. Did Jesus and Mary Magdalene have a tantric relationship? Did they go and study tantra in the East? But I mean, let's go back to Egypt. This was already being practiced in Egypt, so it is part of Gnosticism as well. And I've got a little chart here. Where is it? I'm just going to skip forward for a second here. So this is a little chart of what Gnosticism really is, okay? You see it in the middle there. So it has some of the beliefs from Islam and Sufism. Sufism is lovely with the beloved, and we see this as well in the works of Dante Alighieri and the Divine Comedy, and the poets of Italy, the Templar artistic branch called the Fideli di Amore, the loyal to love. Love, again, we have that word. And we're working here with knowledge of the heart, as I call it. So we have Islam, Sufism, Kabbalah, Judaism, the Christian mystics and the Rosicrucians, Christianity, and Hermeticism, so that's, and classical paganism. The mysteries, in essence. For me, this is what the Knights Templar embraced. And this is definitely what I embrace. So, going back to love and things, 2 things before I get into the charges and what led the Templars to their downfall. So, hold on, I'm just going to move this bar because it's annoying me here. So going back to Egypt, or staying with Egypt, we can talk about a particular god, Harpocrates, he was represented with his right hand normally placed near his heart, okay, and the left one, let me just try and do this. Okay, something like that. Sometimes it's a little bit like that. So this is going to remind you of somebody, okay? Heart, hand, and by the left, right? And Apuleius, who was an initiate in the mysteries, said, because he's related to silence, secrecy was another of the charges and things that the Templars would be blamed for. Okay, but I just wanted guys to give you a little bit of the background here as to why they were secret about certain things. So Apuleius, who was an initiate in the mysteries of Isis, said, "By no peril will I ever be compelled to disclose to the uninitiated the things that I have entrusted to me on condition of silence." The best known champion of silence and secrecy was Pythagoras. And of course, he studied in Egypt, where Jesus is also believed to have been studied, and many scholars. He studied the mysteries. The mysteries is what in modern days we call the occult. Has nothing to do with Satanism, okay? So that's just nonsense, people who associate that with witchcraft or anything like that. It is just basically based on the 7 liberal noble arts that the Knights Templar would have to study, and that anybody at the time was actually studying, including alchemy, music, grammar, rhetoric, and many other things. So to become a member of this Pythagorean school, an initiate would take also silence for 2 to 5 years. Novices were called listeners, and they are not permitted to partake in class discussions, okay? Pythagoras believed that the universe was made up of numbers. Numerology is very, very important. So they were the elements of all beings. And this is key to understanding sacred geometry in the churches. So I want to show you a picture of Harpocrates, this Egyptian god of silence, with his hand on his heart sometimes. And sometimes he's shown covering his mouth to sort of signal silence. Who does he remind you of? Just bear with me on that one. He's actually known as the child Horus. He's another version of the child Horus. And of course, we have the Trinity with Osiris, Isis, and Horus. And Isis and the child Horus are seen not as the Virgin Mary per se, but more as Mary Magdalene and a child of Jesus. Okay, so another thing on love, the Cathars. I will talk about them a little bit further on with the charges as well. So I don't know if any of you were aware, but Bernard de Clairvaux, who was the head of the Cistercian order at the time, the Knights Templar founded the Knights Templar, was actually family of the Knights Templar. And his mother, Aleph, was Cathar. Aleph de Montbard. Montbard in France was a Cathar Jewish community. You can look this up. So roots, they matter so much. The Cathars' most sacred book was called the Book of Love. And not to link any ties here to Freemasons or anything, but one of my favorite mausoleums in the world is in Mountain View, Pasadena, California. And there's a beautiful, one of the areas, I mean, the architecture is Masonic, but one of the areas is called the Library of Love, where you see Masons buried with Eastern Star, which is kind of like a Masonic order for females that was set up. And it was called the Library of Love. It's no coincidence. No coincidence. So the Cathars suffered greatly, and I think it was the only crusade that took place in Europe at the time. A very large Holocaust, and for me it's a horror that I still go over, and I want to do more for the Cathars, to be honest. They were called the heretics of the Languedoc of southern France, but they were also known as the bonhommes, the good men, and they were actually seen as model citizens. They called themselves the Pure Ones after the goddess known as the Pure One, which is a term for Virgin, Great Creator, Mother Mary. Creator here is key term. Those of you who work with the Shekinah, the divine feminine energy of God, which is the divine feminine life force creator of God, connected to Kundalini, sexual energy. Kundalini is coiled up like a snake. And remember those chakras, the energy points that I showed you before? Kundalini lives in the root chakra between, and normally it's awoken between the root chakra and the sacral chakra, which is connected to sexuality, the root being connected to our stability and place in life. Origins are very important. I keep saying it. So Mari actually means sea, mermaid, love, many more things, goddess. It comes from mer. And this will be my books. I've talked a lot about mermaids lately. But the mermaids, Jesus was known as a merman. He was the fisher of men, or fisher king, of men. And in the Grail, there's a reference to him as that as well. And you see a lot of mermaids in Cistercian churches. And of course, the Cistercian order, we've just said that there's a connection to the Knights Templar there. So the church murdered hundreds of thousands of Cathars because of their alternative views about Jesus. Other reasons as well, but that was one of them. And they claimed to have a book called the Book of Love, Mari Tara. This mysterious manuscript is actually attributed to Jesus, and it was transmitted through the centuries, and some of the beliefs are believed to be held in Templar some of the Templar actions, some of the Templar rites, and so on. Okay, so the Book of Love was the foundation of the Cathar Church of Love, or Amor. Now reverse the letters here and tell me what amor spells. Roma, Rome. So it was the reverse of that. Right. Templar rule, the Latin rule. Okay, there are many versions of the Latin rule. First, it obviously came out in Latin, and it was put together and written by Bernard de Clairvaux, who I just mentioned, and Hugh de Payens. So first in Latin, and then in French, and then in the actual languages of the order for wherever it was based. So we have a Catalan rule, we have an Italian one, we have an English one, and so on. And what's interesting, if you speak languages, which I've been truly grateful to be able to learn, is that these rules embraced local traditions and customs, so they vary from one country to another. It's not the same rule. The initial rule had 72 articles, if I'm not wrong, and it gets expanded over time, and the other versions as well. And they will have some things in common, but there's a lot of differences between them. So if you can actually look at the different versions of the Templar rule, the Templar code, you learn a lot, because they show you this tolerance that we spoke about before. This is a digitized version. This is what it looks like. It's quite beautiful. But what was found in this particular digitized version, which I think is really interesting, is a love poem believed to have been written by a Templar. So what's a love poem doing in between the pages of the Knights Templar rule? Think on that one for a little bit. So this is, we can have a little pause for questions here if anybody wants to continue. So let me just put the screen because I can't see you guys. I don't know what I've done here. Okay, so this is the Templar seal. There's many of them. We have the two riders on the horse, which means a lot of things. And we have the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The Al-Aqsa Mosque was given to them in 1118 when they became official. For me, is when they became official, not founded, okay? And they specifically asked for it, and there's a reason, because they believed that the Temple of Solomon was underneath it. And the Temple of Solomon is quite important to the Knights Templar and to these families and who they are. So this is open for discussion. You can put your hands up if anybody wants to contribute here, but the name of the Knights Templar, this is going to be the first clue here. And then we're going to go into a little Templar meditation afterwards, just 5 minutes. What's in a name? So they're called, I'll say it in English, the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon. That was their whole name. Yes? Correct? Right. Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon. Let's kind of dissect this a little bit. Who is Christ? Because I'm going to tell you one thing, he's not Jesus. Jesus is a Christ, yes. But before Jesus, the word Christus, the term existed prior to Jesus. So this is the first clue as to who the Templars were and what they were doing, okay? Anybody want to contribute? Some of you know, so I mean, that's going to be cheating because I've had this discussion with some of you. Andy, you know. Nobody? So a Christus, what essentially is an initiate of the mysteries. We are mentioning initiates with Pythagoras before. So a student, if you will, of the mysteries, okay? That's what a Christus is. So we have the poor fellow soldiers of the initiate, in brackets, in the Temple of Solomon. And now, why the Temple of Solomon? And don't just tell me because they were given the Temple of Solomon, because no, that's not it. Who was Solomon? I'll let you guys think on that one. But if we start to look at the clues, the hidden messages in plain view, they're right there in front of us. And the name is the first one, The name of the order. So I'm going to go to this. How am I going to do this? 1 second. Okay. So this you don't need to watch. I'm going to play this for about 2-3 minutes. And I want you guys to get comfortable now. Get comfortable on your chairs. We're going to ground for a moment. So put your feet flat on the floor. Okay. And if you've ever done this before, meditation, all you need is the soles of your feet. You don't need to take your shoes off. So, and just connect with the earth for a moment. Imagine back, and then when you're ready, just come back to the room and open your eyes. How was that? Relaxed, hopefully? Okay, I hope I've given you some visuals of possibly what these knights could have endured and why they did the things they did. And I wish with the current situation we have right now with Israel and everything that is going on, and Ukraine, of course, it would not do us any harm to embrace these Templar principles. I think we could all learn from them. I'm going to move on now to the trial of the Templars and Chinon and everything else before we finish up. I want to just put a video for 1 minute, okay? So just to get the context here. So let me just share it, and you'll see my screen now, I imagine. So just 1 minute of this.
October 1307, Friday the 13th. Hundreds of Knights Templar had been summoned to Paris. Suddenly, 620 were arrested and thrown in jail. The accusations levied at the Templars added up to the worst charge possible: heresy. But the Knights Templar were Christian warrior heroes, the SAS of the medieval Crusades.
They were the best trained soldiers since the Roman Empire.
So why were these devout and popular warriors brought to their knees? At last, a secret document, hidden for 700 years, reveals the truth about the greed, politics, and power play that would destroy the most legendary military elite in history.
Right, so that's a little bit the context that we have of what happened really leading up to the Knights Templar. The Knights Templar were an order, and regardless of when they were set up, that were around for around, let's just say, roughly 200 years. And they had some very noble pursuits. For me, fighting was the least of them, but it was becoming better men to make this world a better place. In short, there are many things that entailed, and of course they were protecting pilgrims in various ways. Let me not go down that road again. They were responsible for banking. They imported a lot of knowledge from the East into Europe. They did so many things that we should be grateful for. But unfortunately, as humans, we are not very grateful. And I mentioned before that because they embraced knowledge from other cultures and did go into agreements with the assassins and so on, they would be perceived as sympathizers of Islam. And that was a very, very dangerous thing. And the Cathars were accused of the same, by the way. It was a very, very dangerous thing during these times, which would lead to the main charge of heresy. That is really, really what brought them down, okay? So I'm just going to go over very quickly a couple of things here. Give me a second here. So I mentioned before that we have 127 charges to the order. Yes, okay. Now we do have 10 main charges, which I'm going to go into in a moment. But before I go into that, the slide that you're seeing now has to, let me just put it in screen again. Okay, 1 second. Right. So, sorry, I'm just playing with the bar here. The Chinon parchment, what is that? Okay, now this is very relevant because this was discovered not so long ago by Barbara Fralle, an Italian paleographer at the Vatican archives. Supposedly it was discovered, it was a great surprise. It's a document that kind of proves that Pope Clement V absolved the last Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, and the rest of the Knights Templar. I'll get into the proceedings in a minute and how they happened, but basically, in a nutshell, 1307, these orders are given. De Molay was actually there already because he was there as a pallbearer for the funeral of Catherine of Courtenay the day before, and this was on purpose, I think, to trap him. This is how de Nogaret arrested him in person, which I would like to bring de Nogaret back and say a few things to him. But anyway, so there are a few documents I'm going to mention, and I have put a little video which prove that the Templars were framed, okay? The charges thrown against them were pretty much the standard charges of the time. So there are a lot of other, from previous popes to even Marguerite Porret, who I've mentioned recently in an article on witchcraft. She's a woman who is known to have written a book that was deemed heretic. She would have been one of the first women to have written a book on anything that was considered heretic. When we were discussing this in a course in the London Imperial College, I remember we were talking about grimoires, and nobody could think of, even though that women were normally accused of witchcraft, nobody could think of any book that had been written by a woman that was heretical, because they were all written by men. So that's quite interesting. But anyway, this is one of the arrest warrants that you see here. And if anybody's interested, there are several websites, but I want to say something about Barbara Fralle and Chinon and all of this. And I'm going to try and be as kind as I can. I'm not sure if I'll manage it, but there's a letter that exists, supposedly written by 3 cardinals to King Philip IV, where they inform him of the absolution granted to the high-ranking officers of the Knights Templar. So this letter existed prior to the Chinon parchment being found. So the Pope disbanded the Knights anyway, as he was threatened by Philip to keep the peace. He was pretty much coerced. And these knights would be tortured, denied an afterlife. Everything was taken from them, even their good name. Their reputation really, really took a hit. And this is something that I'm working really hard to restore. I want to give them back their good name. I also want to show the world who the Knights Templar really were, because we haven't really been telling their story. Not really. We've only been telling a very small part of it, and a lot of parts are incorrect. So I don't claim to know everything. And history is an evolving, living thing that is always unearthing new evidence, new secrets. So history changes. You know, what was valid 10 years ago might not be valid today because of new evidence that is being found. However, I work with all the languages that I can, all the skills and tools in my historian toolkit, you know, from ancient energies to archaeology to medieval graffiti, Mason marks, a lot of things, you know, because they are evidence too. And they have been accepted as evidence since the 1980s, thanks to the work of 2 German archaeologists. But anyway, going back to this document, which was discovered by surprise as letter, it proves that the last Grand Master were innocent. I do want to mention that Barbara Fralle's wonderful book and discovery is not so wonderful. And I have a little bone to pick with her and the Vatican. Let's just say it. Because in the old days, when records were made, there would be an official version of something, and then there would be the draft version. It was called the rubrica, okay? So, which is what Barbara Frale discovers in 2001 by chance is the mundum, the official version of those records on parchment. But this wasn't really a surprise, and I'm kind of upset and angry that not enough historians are calling this out, because there was a German, Heinrich Finke, in 1907, who actually published the draft version of exactly the same thing that Barbara Frale published in her wonderful discovery in 2007, I think it was. So the only thing she added new were a few unpublished pages of interrogations. So needless to say, I will not be buying her book. So yeah, I'm sorry, but no. This adds nothing new, you know. And it wasn't such a sensational discovery, but it was a very well publicized initiative by the Vatican Archives on the discovery. A publicity stunt, which the church profited once again from the murder of innocents. This was known by the church, and this was a historian since 1907, that they were innocent. But so there was nothing sensational about Frale's discovery, but why hasn't this been said enough? I don't know. There was also an incident, and I'll show a few slides in a moment, of a group of Knights Templar descendants in Spain taking the Vatican to court. I wish I would have known at the time, because I would have joined them, to be honest. In 2007 was the 7th centenary anniversary of the celebrations of the beginning of the proceedings against the Templars. And the church profited from this affair of the Templars, as de Muir calls it, by publishing 800 copies at 5,900 euros as luxury editions of this document, the parchment edition, the Mundum, found by Frale. You know, I don't think this is right. You know, I really don't think this is right. This lawsuit was by the Sovereign Order of Christ, and they claimed that the order was dissolved by Clement with more than 9,000 properties, as well as countless pastures, mills, and other commercial ventures. And they wanted not just to reclaim damages, but to restore the good name of the Knights Templar, something which I'm really trying hard to do. According to this order of Knights Templar, modern Knights Templar, the Sovereign Order of Christ, I think the name was, the order was dissolved through an infamous trial without evidence, and the number of knights on the date of the arrest was 15,300. This is the numbers they give, of whom 650 were killed and 14,650 escaped. And their Grand Master, Jacques de Molay, and the preceptor of Normandy, Geoffrey de Charnay, were burned at the stake on the 18th of March, 1314. This order called for a reinstatement of the order. It asked for financial compensation. It also remanded that the priesthood be recognized and that all medieval Templars tortured and murdered be considered martyrs. And now these last few things and the request for the to form an army or armed corps, which is a new request they've made, they've consistently taken the Vatican to court since 2007. I think last year or a few months ago was the last time, it was very recent, that they tried it again, asking for an army, an armed Templar, modern army, to intervene in religious conflicts as a mediator between parties. It's interesting, I think. But anyway, let me just show you the slides. So this is the website of the church. Well, I don't know who runs this website, but this is where you can buy the wonderful copies and give the church your money for having done what they did to the Templars, because they were also responsible. So, and this is the new, when was this? I have the date here. 2023, 11th October, so it is very recent. So, anyway. So, the top 10 charges, the top 10. Main charge was heresy, okay? 127 articles against the order, 88 against individuals. So, these are the big 10. New entrants to the Templar order had to deny the Christ, the Holy Virgin, and the saints. The Templars are told that Christ was a false prophet and there was no hope of receiving salvation through belief in him. Knights were ordered to spit on a crucifix and even urinate or trample on it. The order worshipped a head of some description, possibly that of a cat with 3 faces or an idol called Baphomet. Some of these charges are thrown at the Cathars as well, by the way, and other so-called heretics. But this idol was encircled with cords, which Templars then wore around their waists. The Knights Templar rejected the sacraments of the Catholic Church. Yeah, okay, this one I'll give them that, because they did. It was thought that the Grand Master and other leading Templars could absolve sins, even though they were laymen and not priests. New entrants kissed on the mouth, navel, stomach, buttocks, and spine. Remember the chakras? Yes and no. It happened, but not like that, okay? Homosexuality was encouraged. No, not really. In fact, the Templars were never accused of being homosexuals prior to the proceedings, while other orders were. Chapter meetings and initiations were held in strictest secret, with only Templars present, and those that revealed any details to outside people would be punished with imprisonment or death. Remember when I talked about Harpocrates, the god of silence in Egypt, and how in the mysteries and Pythagoras, initiates had to be silent for 2 to 5 years? Did I not say that the Templars were initiates? Well, this is where that comes from, okay? So, like Christ, they became Agnus Dei as well. So, just before I go into the next slide, these things also contributed to bringing the Templars down, okay? So the charges, those are the top 10, with heresy being the main one. But the fall of Acre in 1291, the Templars were never forgiven for this. There were growing rumors of arrogance and rogue behavior, sympathizers of Islam and envy for their riches. I mean, the whole tolerance thing that I mentioned before. They refused to accept Philippe le Bel as a Knights Templar. Okay, this happened in 1305. What is perhaps not mentioned as much is that they also refused to pay a ransom to Philippe's father. Okay, and in fact, there was a plan to get rid of the Templars already with his grandfather, but never mind that. That's for my books. They refused to be merged with the Hospitallers. Nobody wanted to be merged with the Hospitallers. I don't really blame them. And then the expulsion of Lombards and the Jews in 1306. I need to mention this because Philippe was needing money. The country was in significant debt due to wars and also devaluing the currency many times. And he tried to get his hands on Templar assets. He tried to become a Templar. They didn't want him. So then he went for the Lombards, who were an Italian banking group. Even today, I have things with the Lombards. So I can't get rid of things relating to the Templars. But anyway. And then, not happy enough with that, the Jews in 1306 suffered confiscation of assets and being expelled from France. And then, of course, in 1307, we have the affair of the Templars, the trials, the proceedings of the Templars in France. So I want you to think about these 3 things before we watch the next video. It's 2 minutes long, okay? So bearing in mind the context, and we're going to see what happened to the Templars. The Templars, we have very few confessions. We have some confessions, but we have very few. So, and we'll see in a minute, point number 1, can we actually believe these confessions that we have? 2, do you think the Templars were guilty? Or were they perhaps victims of a preconceived plan? Scapegoats, which I would agree. This just now the announcement was made about the Templars. The document written 3 to 4 months before the arrest of the Templars shows that there were Templars These are carvings that were found in Chinon in the guardhouse of Dom. That's the tree of life which we've seen a minute. I'll show you guys these again. These are some of the names of those interrogated. And read your turn. Right, so that video I created using a theta brainwave meditation track, Gregorian chant, yes, but it uses the same brainwave frequency that we use in mediumship, trance-mediumship, working with the heart chakra and the astral layer, as I mentioned before. And also, it's basically the state, if you measure brainwaves, when we are between being awake fully and being half asleep, being fully asleep. That's theta brainwaves. Their color is green, like the heart chakra. Experiments have been done on this and research, but they are the brain waves that have been measured on mediums like myself when we go into trance and when we connect with the spirit world. I always say that the heart is the invisible bridge between the other world and our world. So I wanted to do the meditation with that track because theta brainwaves make us, it's a healing brainwave, but they make us more receptive to information. They would have been used in Gregorian chant as well, and with sacred geometry that is enhanced, and building over water, which is where churches were built mostly. Water carries energy, so again, double whammer there. It would really enhance the effect of whatever you were being indoctrinated or brainwashed. So I'm not wanting to brainwash any of you tonight. I tried it at a convention. That's how I began a lecture at the beginning of this year. But I hope that information stays with you. That was the whole point of doing the theta brainwave with that. And I don't want to make you feel uncomfortable, but I kind of do. Because these men died and they didn't deserve it. So I want you all to take a moment to remember them today and honor them, even though Friday 13th has passed. But we can honor our ancestors and those that are no longer here any day of the week. So we're all gathered here today from different nations, all with an interest in the Knights Templar and the Cathars that I need to mention. The Cathars actually, when the persecution happened, which the Knights Templar refused to be involved officially, the Cathar, Bernard de Clairvaux tried to convert them. This is what he had to do publicly. He couldn't just say, hey, come here and join the Templars and we'll give you protection, because he couldn't do that. But the bodies of Cathars that were burned and murdered were recovered by Templars and buried, given proper burial in Templar lands. I think that tells us a lot. They saw them as their brothers, as their own, and they buried them in lands of their own because they were their own. So I'm finishing up. So the torture is almost over. We have just about 10 minutes, and then we'll entertain questions and so on. So just letting you guys know the schedule. So now that we've seen a little bit what happened to the Templars and the torture and so on, the confessions happened because torture was used. In places where confessions were not, where Templars, were not interrogated, like England, for example, or Ireland, there was no torture there, or Scotland, well, the two Templars that were interrogated, we have no confessions. Take out the torture and we have no confessions. So what does that tell us? So with all the data, facts versus hearsay here, the testimony of most of the Templars was that the order had been completely corrupted and degraded by heresy as the main charge. Data compiled reveals names of 2,330 Templars. This is according to Alain de Moger. We have 1,120 living Templars involved in one of the proceedings. This is in France, by the way, I'm referring to, between 1307 and 1311, and 1,210 Templars who were still alive, whose names are cited. 628 interrogations only, okay? But this number is not completely correct, because some of these Templars were interrogated twice or even 3 times, so this number is not really real. The great majority of Templars, of the 659 Templars who did defend the order in May 1310, this was called the Templar Revolt of Sens, do not appear in interrogation records. It seems that the Templars were carefully selected because they wanted to condemn them. They were not interested in innocence. I think this is quite shocking. So I have his book here. I quite like his book. I really recommend it. Alain de Moger. And I'm going to mention also Malcolm Barber with regards to the proceedings of the Templar. And my favorite historian of many Templar topics is Alan J. Forey. I highly recommend their work. But Demogère, in the book that I have behind me, says many historians of the Temple, and I was with them, albeit with some slight differences, have adopted this argument. The renunciation of Christ, the spitting or trampling on the cross, the obscene kissing, the being encouraged to engage in sodomy may all have taken place. Moreover, almost all the Templars admitted to these. Yes, they renounced their faith, but not from their mouths, not from their hearts. Yes, they spat, but next to the cross, not on it. The encouragement to engage in sodomy, but it was not acted on, and so on. There's a historian called Anne-Marie Chagny-Sèvres, French. She rejects as unfounded the stories about worshipping a cat, the omission of the words, the encouragement to homosexuality, and the sacrificing to idols. But she does say that the renunciation and spitting on the cross are a problem. So I'm going to add a little fire, a little more wood to the fire here by saying that they did, in essence, and I believe that they would have renounced and spat on the cross. And there's a particular testimony of some Templar, I can't remember the name right now, that says that Jacques de Molay told him, do not put your faith on the cross, for it's much too young. Think about that one. They were never against Jesus or the cross per se on which Jesus was crucified. However, I have to go back to the initial thing that I said about what's in a name. What's in a name? Because I've asked this to many of you who are modern Knights Templar. How many churches do we have that are Templar, that are actually dedicated to Jesus in the name? None. None. Because Jesus was a prophet for them. He was an initiate like they were. The Templars were initiates. But we have churches dedicated to Mary Magdalene and John the Baptist, who were the initiators. Okay? And Mary, Mother of God, and female saints, and so on. But you will not find, and in a Templar church that is dating from the time, you will not find a crucifix with Christ on it. This is a very, very rare thing. Sometimes it's depicted on carvings and graffiti, but no, because they do not believe that Christ was crucified on the cross. They see the crucifixion as the Egyptian ritual that I showed you, a symbolic death in life, because that's what that ritual is. I can tell you now. That is called the rite of resurrection, and it's a death in life where you die from all your beliefs. Even the Essenes practice this, by the way. It was a 3-day initiation rite where you went into a cave, and it had a lot to do with a certain substance that was given to the initiate, which would put them in kind of like coma. This was practiced also in Greece in the first sanatorium, the sanatorium of Asclepius, the Temple of Apollo and Asclepius in Epidavros, where incubation was used as a healing technique to heal. And patients would experience surgery while being in a coma-like state. And in fact, that's what's done even in modern times. Being in coma helps us heal. So after that coma was out, they would be reborn with higher wisdom, and the body would be in a better state. Those of you who have had a coma will know what that means. So Barbara Fowler here, well, I'm not even going to mention this. She suggests the existence of a Codice Umbra, an initiation code, meant to test a recruit, and so on. No, not really. There will be things that are not found yet, but we have to think of the Templars as an order within an order as well. And there's various levels. This is very similar to what happens in Freemasonry as well in a degree. So you have to advance in wisdom. And again, it's based on Egypt and the teachings. Wisdom is a gift given to the wise. Okay? So some of the Templars, the lower Templars, would never know what was really happening. this is what I just mentioned before. The Geography Confessions matches the use of torture. And outside of France, where torture was not used, there were no confessions. It's really, really important to bear that in mind. So I was talking about, just before we go to the questions in 5 minutes, I was talking about accepting historical evidence outside traditional history. There is a work which another scholar whose lecture I attended recently brought up, and it's a work published originally in the 19s in German. And I'm mentioning this because a lot of you are fixated on evidence being documented records, written records only. We find evidence in the laws of a country, in the traditions, in the customs, in carvings, in motifs, in architecture. That is evidence too. And these two men here, these two archaeologists, set the precedent for that in the 90s, okay? So the fact that, or the matter that old school historians are not working with this doesn't mean that it's not accepted, because it is. They just don't know how to work with this. There are not a lot of historians out there who have, and it's not to put myself here under the spotlight, but who work with energies, who work with spiritual beliefs, who work with mysteries and understand what the mysteries are. I have studied everything that you were meant to study as a Templar. And in fact, I live my life very much like a Templar, with the exercise, the food, everything. So I can understand a lot of things just because of this. And if you all did that and began to study alchemy and began to study all of these subjects and the mysteries, the blindfold, so to speak, would come off, and you would be able to read everything that is just there, you know. So not just written records. This is my historical toolkit. So anthropology, archaeology, esoteric wisdom, religion, laws, mythopoetics as well. There are a lot of myths and truths in myths, because they contain the patterns of acting, the archetypes. So from the earliest times. So this is important. And I work with psychical research. I am a medium. I don't like to say that word, but I do read energy. I do read thoughts and memories of people, from objects, from buildings. So I work with all of this. And of course, numerology and so on. I want to, just before we go to the questions, show you some graffiti. Okay, that's the last thing that I'm going to show you. And then we'll do the questions to be on time. The event was finishing at 9:30, and then we had a Q&A, so I'm pretty much bang on time. So Jerry Glover published an article in the Fortune Times, which I have for you to see, and I will send that out as well. And he talks about what I've just mentioned. A lot of people think that the Templars vanished up in smoke in 1307. And a lot of scholars, I don't really know why, except for the fact that maybe studying medieval graffiti and mason marks, well, mason marks is older to study, but medieval graffiti is certainly newer. We talk about Violet Pritchard's book in 1967 being the first real precedent of this. But many of these researchers and scholars completely ignore or skate over the fact that the Templars did leave us a lot of startling indications of their thoughts in the form of carvings and graffiti. I work with graffiti. I mean, the messages are there, you know. So there's a lot of Templar graffiti left in Warwick Castle in England and Chinon Castle and the guardhouse in Dôme in France. And it's very disturbing. I would like to share some of it with you. So let me just stop the screen and I will share the screen again. All right, can you all see this? This is the website of, with the article. It's called The Lost Graffiti of the Templars. You can read it later, but the first thing I want to draw your attention to is this, which is a Jerusalem cross, as you can see it. Keeps appearing in my life all the time. But this is connected to Godfrey Bouillon, of course, and the order, the Christian order of the Holy Sepulchre, of course, which has, for me, a lot to do with the founding of the Templars. So this is found as a first graffiti. We do have a Christ here. We have other figures. We also have these symbols here. This symbol I found a lot in the north, in Scotland, in cathedrals and abbeys, and Orkney as well. I keep finding it a lot. But this is very curious. Now, I'll let you guys read that on your own time. You can see the symbols here on the wall. This is quite an interesting one. Some people have talked about the menorah here. So there's what I mentioned before about Gnosticism and beliefs. That all comes up in the graffitis. You can see it. The menorah is there. Now this one, I believe, and some of you here from Rosslyn Chapel, that I saw this in Rosslyn. I know I did. But the day that I was there, some lady had fallen down the stairs and I just couldn't go downstairs. So I quickly I think I saw it. And I've seen it somewhere else. And I think I've seen it in Ireland as well. So I'm going to draw your attention to the right side of the screen where my mouse is hovering right now. So this is, in essence, it's called the Tree of Life. And the Tree of Life is, you can see a cup here as well in an octagonal shape, a grail, okay? This is very, very important and comes up so much. And of course the other designs here, but this, keep your eyes on that one. And then at the end of the article, I want to show you something else. Vesica Pisces, this is connected to Pythagoras, the divine feminine. We see it a lot. This is the Holy Grail that I was mentioning before, and the Tree of Life. And I want to show you this because that's Pope Clement. He's actually portrayed as a snake. Wonder why. So I will share this with you guys by email as well. So, and one last thing, and then we'll do the Q&A. You've been very patient with me, I think, all of you. So this is, we were talking about love and the heart before. So we have the heart there. I wanted to mention something just before I finish, because I mentioned this the first time I did this talk, and today, for whatever reason, I think I've kind of left it out. I don't know why. But when the Templars were dissolved, okay, well, when they're arrested, and then we have the proceedings and all of these things, there was a reason why I began this talking about love. And I talked about women, and I talked about Templars also having women. Spain, there are actually several preceptories that were run by Templar women. But there were many Templar knights, and it's not true that they were not married, not just Hugh de Payens, who we see that there's this letter from a bishop asking him not to leave his wife for the Knights of the Templar. But actually, we have documents of the trials of the Templar following their arrest. De Mougère, again, and Barber and Nicholson mention these. And the Templars that survived torture and interrogations, they were eventually released subject to a set of conditions. And the conditions were that they would leave their wives, those that were married. So again, it's not true that we have Templars that are not married. Yes, the Latin root contains something about celibacy, but you have to understand this in the context. Celibacy there is not really celibacy. It's something else that was practiced at the time. And if we go back to the beliefs of the earlier Israelites and Gnosticism, I'm going to mention something very controversial: semen retention. They were not against sex. They were not against, and even the Cathars, in a way. They were against the spilling of seed when you're not procreating. This is even in the Bible. So go back to the Bible if you like and revisit that, but that is what they mention. Substitute translations, mistranslations happen. Substitute celibacy for semen retention, and we're getting close to what they meant. Okay. So another example that they were married is that they were asked to abandon their wives and children and continue to live in isolation in monastical settings. Now, if we go back to the 4th century, when the Church of Rome asked priests to do pretty much the same thing, this was for a main reason, and this has been an underlying theme throughout here as to why the Templars suffered what they suffered. Why do you think the Church, there's two reasons really, the Church asked the Templars and the priests to abandon their wives? One is money. If you're married, when you die, everything you own goes to your wife and kids. If you're not married, it will go to the order or the church. And the second has to do with the sacred sex, a ritual called the Hero's Gamos, which was practiced by Mary Magdalene and Jesus. You can see this in the anointing of the feet. And actually, Christos means the anointed one. So the union of the masculine and the feminine, that was becoming like God. That would grant you a resurrection. That would grant you higher wisdom. And that was something the church did not want. So women were made prostitutes because women were initiators, because we have what is sometimes described as the cosmic womb. The womb is a portal between worlds, life and death. We give life. The church could not bear that power. And that's why we went from a matriarchal religion, because Mary is in fact a name, but it was also a title. That's why you have so many Marys in the Bible. And Mary was a title for a priestess. It comes from Egyptian, Mari as well. Remember I mentioned mermaids and Myrrh, and well, it comes from there. Isis is known as Mary Isis, Mari Hathor, goddess Hathor as well. So these priestesses, and actually the mother of Jesus and Mary Magdalene were both priestesses of a divine feminine temple that worshipped the divine feminine side of God, the Shekinah, sometimes seen as the dove or the rose, especially by the Rosicrucians. So, with this said, we're going to move on to the questions. I do want to leave you with this quote before we go to the questions, and I want to also talk about, just for 1 minute, something that I'm doing with Andy. So in ancient Egypt, where we've seen where the heart was so significant even in the afterlife, which was the only part not removed, it was believed that all things were created with magic. We therefore all have magic within. And by making the right choices in our lives as magicians, those of you who follow the tarot, have the tarot, the magician card, the first card of the tarot, that's a Freemason, but it's also got all the Templar symbolism right there. By making the right choices as magicians, we can create our own destiny and achieve our dreams, our Sankara, or a holy grail. But, there's always a but. Choose wisely. While the true grail will bring you life, the false grail will take it from you. That's from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, but I live by this. So this is some of my work, which you can see my website. The new paperback I've released. The upcoming books, I'm doing 2 books on the Knights Templar. The Way of the Rose is the first one that will be coming out with Steve, all of them. The second one is The Way of the Stars, and then there's a companion book to these. And I had promised to give you all a surprise. So I want to take this moment, Andy, if you're listening. This is our moment where I announce things a little bit. So, wine. I embrace things from history which are good for our daily lives, and I resurrect others. So I came across an idea because I've been working and consuming spikenard. Spikenard as in as an oil. This is from Jerusalem, and I use it for meditation, but also the spikenard root, which is very beneficial for many conditions in my tea, and was used in a specific product with other ingredients that we're not going to mention. They're secret ingredients, but we've had to really outsource these. It was used in making a very specific wine that was drunk by Templars, written about by Templars, and specifically appears in a Grail romance of Parsifal. It was called Pimen. So this is a real wine. And Andy and I teamed up here, Andy from Dos Templarios in Belgium, and the Grand Officer of OTAC, the Belgian Templar Order. And I said to Andy, look, I think we should do this, you know. I think we should bring back a part of history, resurrect the elixir of life of the Templars, but also because something that hasn't been talked about, and I will be talking about it, is that wine and Templars go together. The Templars, if you look at the families in Ireland as well that were Templar families, and around the world, where there is a vineyard, an historic vineyard, there was a Templar preceptory, and the Templars were involved in either making the wine or trading the wine. In fact, Kilkenny, which was the seat of the Butler family, and the Butlers were known as, they were Normans, Fitzwalter, but the title they received was Boutillier. Boutillier was, in a way, the king's steward, the king's wine taster, shall we say. So, and the Butlers are connected not just to the Rosslyn Chapel St. Clair's, but let's go to Scotland again, which I love, and look at the Stuart monarchy. The Butlers, the Fitzwalters, marry with the daughter of Robert the Bruce, Marjorie Bruce. And we have the Stuart monarchy of Scotland through that union. And the Butlers in Ireland, in Kilkenny, that was their main headquarters, gave most of the lands there to the Templars. And remember that I said before that we have in Scotland some properties that were in Templar hands well until the 16th century. Well, in Ireland, we have the same situation. We have to go, we haven't talked about it, I'm working with it, but if we look at Kilkenny, the seat of the Butler family, and an area where the Butler family gave the Templars most of their lands, and where those abbeys that I'm working with connected to the Templars are based, we find properties there in Templar hands well after the 1300s and 1400s and 1500s. And there was a very thriving wine trade there run by Templars. And the Knights Templar walked in Kilkenny after 1307, still wearing their Templar clothing, like nothing had happened. Kilkenny will always belong to them, and many other places. So to that comment that was made on my page about the Templars coming back, they never left. They never left. So with that, I would like to share a video of a song, but I will leave it. I will send that to you guys. So we're going to do, I'm going to stop the share, and we're going to, before I stop the share, sorry. In case you hadn't noticed, that bottle of wine there, that's resting, that flask there, that's work that I have to thank Andy, who's watching here, Andy Gods. So that is our wine, our beautiful wine, resting like Sleeping Beauty, waiting to just absorb all the flavors. And Andy's going to be the first one to taste it. So if he doesn't live, you know what happened. You can all blame me. So well, I think we'll have to give it to Bob and Lode if they're watching first. So maybe any enemies. Can we invite the church? Maybe a few bishops. They can try the wine first. I think that would be good. So I'll stop the share and we can do FAQs. So thank you all for surviving the talk. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for that message. So any questions? I'm happy to answer them. Anyone? Not all at once. Alec, thank you. Well, I'm going to have some wine now. Unfortunately, it's not our wine yet. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Muir, for surviving as well. Thank you. So I think this presentation went better than last time. There were no self-combusting laptops or anything, you know. I did burn some sage before, so, you know, I mean, just in case. Julie, thank you. Thank you. So, Nick, thank you so much. Lovely to meet you. Finally, we will do a Zoom at the end of next week if you're free and available on a nice chat. I'd love to do that with you. So
that would be lovely. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, now you know a little bit my work. It's very different, I think, to most historians.
Maybe, but I totally concur with what you've said.
Thank you. That means a lot. That means a lot. And I'm very, very grateful and appreciative that you come, but also for your wonderful comments on my page on Facebook. They are so welcome and so correct and so enlightening. Please continue to do that. I love it. So some of the things that you're posting, though, I was like the graffiti and everything else. I said, I'm mentioning that today.
I've had to pull back because I get the feeling sometimes that perhaps I'm overstepping the mark and going into your territory, which is not my intention at all. It's just a corroboration, really, that somehow we're obviously on the same wavelength.
We are, and I think there's more of us that are on the same wavelength, which is good. I think the Templars definitely are coming back in more ways than one. But please post whatever you like. You know, my Facebook page is your home, so feel comfortable. And you know, I mean, I don't want to say I'm not an expert or that I am. I'm somebody that has spent her whole life, and now I understand why. I can't really mention it, but I spent my whole life following in the footsteps of the Knights Templar. But I'm a learner. I'm an initiate too, and I can learn from all of you. And I am indeed. I mean, sometimes I have discussions with Dr. Muir there, I mean, about the most bizarre things, and he'll be sending me things sometimes, you know, wonderful, you know, snakes, which have popped up in my life a lot lately, and poems, and his work is amazing. He has an article coming out soon on Aegea, right, the pilgrimage. It was the first account of the first female who traveled to the Holy Land and actually wrote down her experience. It's a wonderful, wonderful article. So whenever that is released, I will share it on my page, and people. And Dr. Muir is a friend. He's a mentor. He's also going to be writing the prologue to my first book on the Way of the Rose, the Divine Feminine. For me, is an absolute honor to have his wisdom and hopefully some of his words on the pages of that book. You know, it's really, I mean, he's wonderful. What can I say? You know, I wish he lived closer. That's the only thing, because Canada is such a stretch for a coffee, you know, at the moment. But I have to go. I have to visit, because the Templars require work and research over there. And I have been in Canada, but not for a while now. But hopefully this year, you know, we'll see. So Andy, I'm seeing you there. Thank you for attending. Also on behalf of your order, the Knights Templar in Belgium. I'm going to take this opportunity to say that Andy has been very supportive of my work, and we met a few months ago. He reached out to me to find out more about the Templars, and I found out more about their order. They're based in Flanders, which for me, I lived in Belgium for almost 4 years, Brussels, but Belgium for me is very, very in my heart, also because of Godfrey Bouillon. He is my main Superman and hero in many ways, you know, and I definitely look forward to going to his castle in Bouillon. I can't wait. And Otak and Andy and the Grandmaster Bob, if he's watching, they've been very kind to invite me to lecture when I release my book there. So I will be giving a presentation in Belgium, and hopefully I'll be going to Tomar as well with you guys, and to Portugal, and maybe many more things. I mean, we need to organize something to Jerusalem, because I've not been. And I'm always, you know, always get left out because I'm a woman on my own. So it's not safe to travel to those places, you know, on your own. So, I mean, can I have the Knights Templar protect me, please? And can we all travel together? I think that would be quite nice, you know. So, so thank you. Hopefully soon we'll have something to celebrate this Christmas with that wine. I want to keep unearthing treasures and secrets of the Templars. I want to bring all the Templar ways back. There's so much that we've left out and that we are forgetting and we're taking for granted. And wine is one of those things that I really don't know why people are not talking about it. You know, Andy has gone to Poland as well and everywhere. And there are Templar breweries there and traditions, you know. So it has always been part of the Templar world, you know, but it's the great forgotten, you know, as well. And it's so very healthy for you. I mean, one glass of wine a day in moderation, you know. I wish I remembered to do a glass of wine a day, but I don't. But, you know, it's anti-aging. It keeps you young, you know. So anyway, thank you, Andy. Thank you, everybody from Rosslyn Chapel that has joined as well. I made very good friends this summer in Scotland. I was very warmly received by Freemasons in Kilwinning, in the Mother Lodge, and also in St. Mary's in Edinburgh, Lodge number 1 and Lodge number 0. I'm not going to go into that debate, but for me, both are the first lodges. You know, I love them both. And Rosslyn Chapel, for me, I have got to return many, many times. James here is an author, if I can say that, James, and a good friend, working on books on Rosslyn Chapel. And we get together once in a while and we'll be messaging each other with, look at this, look at that, look at the symbol, you know. I don't know what time it is in the morning, but we'll be talking about mermaids and dragons and weird things, you know. And he's been very helpful, and he's been a pillar of strength and support with my book. And all the brothers have. I really want to thank them from here, you know, the Freemasons as well. A lot of people think very negative things of them. And I think you can't judge overall, you know, a group of people, you know, because they're individuals at the end of the day as well. But there are connections with Freemasonry and Templars. They definitely are. For me, they're two different bodies today, but they come from the same source. They come from the same place. You know, you cannot ignore that if you're a historian. You cannot, you know. And I wish we could bridge that gap. I saw it myself in Rosslyn Chapel, and I was floored, you know, when I saw the signs and a lot of the things that I've been learning. So, you know, I think we need to, like I said, go back to our roots. Roots matter. And roots, talking about roots, I mean, I've got Scandinavian roots as well. I have Spanish. There's Egyptian thrown in. There's a lot of things thrown in. But the Norse, I work with Norse history as well, and that's very relevant as well with the Knights Templar. So that's something that I will be talking about. So, Annika, I see you there. You stayed the whole lecture. Thank you so much for joining from France. How's it been? Oh, lovely. Très joli. Lovely to see you. Did you like it?
Oh, I thoroughly enjoyed the seminar. I'm not sure what to call it.
I know it was a bit of everything. Lecture, workshop, sort of, I don't know, meditation thrown in, which I bet none of you expected, you know. Like the Templars, I like working with everything they worked with. So I will talk more about the Cathars. I will do a lecture just on the Cathars, because I know you're interested in them. And it is an honor to have somebody here from France who is interested in the Cathars, which for me are very dear, you know, and they suffered greatly. And it's lovely to meet you, finally.
Yes, indeed. It is.
Thank you.
I have a question that I did post, and I was wondering if you could elaborate on the connection with the Temple of Solomon and why it was so important.
Okay.
For the Templars.
Yes.
Thank you.
So the Temple of Solomon, I will leave some things from my book, so I'll tell you a few things that I can tell you today. Okay. Yeah, Andy, don't worry. You go ahead. Whoever wants to stay now can stay. We're just doing questions. So I'll stay as long as you guys want. And whoever wants to go can go, you know. So, yes. Sorry. So I'm just going to reply to to the question by Annika. So the Temple of Solomon. Okay. So Solomon, who is he? Who is he? Bye, Andy. Thank you for joining. Look after our wine. Don't drink it all. Bye. Bye. Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, Annika. So Solomon, who is he in history? Okay, so he's many things. He was actually very loved by God, and he gets given a ring. There's a story that he gets given a ring for building his temple. And the ring is given to him by Archangel Michael, who is very important to the Knights Templar. And it's a ring which has a pentagram on it, actually. So that's also connected to the Knights Templar as well, in many ways. not just because of the ring. And the ring is mentioned by Dr. Muir, actually, in one of his articles that he wrote about. But it was a ring to command demons and angels to build his temple. Because the area of land where he was told to build a temple, you couldn't actually build. There was issues with the land, so you had to go about it in paranormal ways, let's just say, So that's why. But Solomon wrote something which is very, very key, okay, to all of this. I mentioned before the union of the feminine and the masculine. So Solomon is attributed the Song of Songs. I don't know if you've come across that before, the Song of Songs. It's an erotic poem. It's beautiful. You have to read it. And if you have a partner, please get in bed with him and read it together, because that's the best way. That's the best way. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And it is about the sacred marriage, the union of the feminine and the divine, what Mary Magdalene and Jesus had. But Bernard de Clairvaux, whose mother was Cathar, actually wrote 89, I think it was 89 or 86, 86 sermons defending the Song of Songs of Solomon. So why would a Catholic, let's just call him Catholic, a Catholic abbot, write a defense of an erotic poem, of all things, written by Solomon? You have to look at the Marianist part of here and the connection to the divine. So Solomon is important to them because he worked with the energy of the divine feminine. He was known to worship or dedicate his temple also to Asherah. And Asherah is known as the Shekinah, which is the divine life force creation aspect of God, the feminine side of God. But it is also seen as Kundalini, sexual life force creation. So Solomon, who had lots of women, who had this love affair with the Queen of Sheba as well and was punished for it and whatever, worked with the energy of the Shekinah. And the Shekinah, the word itself, also means dwelling place. And it was believed, when the Templars actually found the Temple of Solomon, they believed that he had manuscripts, scrolls, grimoires. I came across an old ancient grimoire that is believed to have been written by Solomon, the Lesser Key of Solomon, it's called, which contains those seals for summoning the angels and demons and so on. But he used a divine feminine energy, which is creation energy. And it was believed that the Templars found that, but they also found the energy there. So they wanted a place with energy. The key is energy. Solomon was a magician. He was many things. He was a favorite of God. He built his temple. He was one of the most advanced men for his time, but he worked with the Shekinah, with the divine feminine energy. This is why they are the four fellow soldiers of Christ in the Temple of Solomon, the temple of the divine feminine, the temple of the Shekinah, of that energy, of a magician or a wizard or whatever you want to call him, of a ruler who was a good ruler. But there's also a family connection as well with Solomon. Okay. So I cannot say more, but he is tied with the Knights Templar and Mary Magdalene and Jesus by blood. So the Rex Deus families that we talk about, the star families, that connection comes there. And then there's more. But I've given you a few pointers and I'll message you privately as well. So hope that answers that. Merci beaucoup. Bonne nuit. Bonne nuit. Sarah, Julie, you're surviving. Any more questions?
Not for me. I'm a bit tired now, so.
I know. I'm giving you all a headache.
No, it was great. It's just that I'm usually in bed by now.
I don't even know what time it is. I'll find out once I get up.
10 o'clock.
God. So I'm working all night. I have a translation of a lawsuit. I also translate. So
thank you. That was really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll send you guys a recording in a day or two.
Okay. So I'll be in touch with you soon.
Yes. And note that I'm going to do some workshops on Templar healing and things, So Annika as well, if you're interested in that, and sacred sexuality, because sacred sexuality is key here, for the Templars. People don't want to talk about that, but I'm going to talk about that. I don't mind if I get thrown on the stake. So Someone's got to do it. So,
okay.
Sarah.
Sign off. All right. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye. Sarah, good night, everybody. We're going, no more questions, right? Okay, night.